When it comes to the success or failure of a business, good design can make all the difference. But what is good design? Well, Pierre and Britney Walters of Blue Artists have offered us an answer with their new upcoming book, Design to Connect: How to Use Design to Better Engage Your Customers. It is scheduled to be released towards the end of September of this year and will be on all major book platforms, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And to quote from it, "The ultimate goal of anything people do, any decision we make, is simply to move away from pain and toward pleasure. Every buying decision you make, think about it, is made with the intent to feel better."
You always want to remember that whatever you're selling and whoever you're selling it to, there's always a person there, a person that has real issues, that has real hopes and dreams, that has flaws, trying to connect with a human being.
This is Build Your Difference, a podcast created by Blue Artists, a brand platform with one goal: to help great visionaries like you build impressive brands. Every month, we'll bring you insightful tips, knowledge, and compelling stories from successful entrepreneurs and the Blue Artists team on how to create and market a winning brand that does more than just launch a new product or service. It starts an ongoing conversation. Because you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Let's start building.
Hi, I'm John Marble, and you're listening to the Build Your Difference podcast. This month, we're talking about design. What is good design? And what does good design do? What are some design challenges we face, and how do we overcome these? To talk about this and more, I recently sat down with Britney Walters, co-founder and design lead at Blue Artists. Britney has a background in graphic design, video game design, television, video and film production, as well as art and animation. So, the book is Design to Connect: How to Use Design to Better Engage Your Customers. And you co-wrote this with Pierre, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Excellent. Well, the first question I wanted to ask you about this is, what was going on for you that led you to feel the need to write a book about design?
Well, first thing, John, there's actually a lot of really great materials out there about design. There's great published materials and books. There's many great articles. Lots of really talented creators are making articles and documents about design.
Right.
So there definitely isn't a shortage of great material out there about design. So I definitely didn't set out to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. But I guess I feel like design is such a big thing, and it can mean so much to so many different people, that there's always room. There's always room to share your knowledge and to speak to areas where you think your voice would be helpful to a particular audience. And I felt that specifically to the folks that we do our best to help, entrepreneurs, small business owners, people who are trying to kind of get things going, but perhaps don't feel very creative. Some of our older clients, maybe, that aren't quite as into the technology as the younger folks, or even some of our younger clients who kind of are aware of it, but have old souls and feel overwhelmed with all their options.
Right.
I just felt that there was still a space to kind of speak to them. And that's what kind of led me to really feel good about writing something like this, despite there being so much material out there about it.
Yeah, I could definitely feel overwhelming. And when you talk about people having different paths and avenues for, into design. So when you're approaching a design project, what would be one of the first things that you feel is important to consider? Are we talking about colors or layout, text? What would you first approach?
Sure. All those things definitely come into play. But I think I would say that the main thought I have kind of breaks down into three. And it's really, what are we selling, or what are we saying? What are we trying to communicate? Who are we communicating that to, and why? And so I know that's kind of sounds like three different things as opposed to like the first thing. But right. I really think, and kind of questioning yourself about what you're doing. You sit down and you have this blank canvas. You open up that fresh sheet in Photoshop and it's just all white, and you just imagine all the different directions you can go.
Right.
It helps to have some fundamental answers to where you're going with this design. And it's funny because they're not necessarily design-ish, questions to ask yourself. You might think it's, the colors, or what font am I going to use? Or, what shapes am I going to put in here? What pictures am I going to use? But really, none of that really matters if you don't know the what, the who, and the why. And so that's the first thing that I really try to hone in on and research is, those key points: what, who, and why.
Yeah, because one of the things you talk about in the book is that keeps coming up is this thing called emotional currency.
Yeah.
And how that's kind of tied back to brands. So it had me thinking, when did it become that brands were sort of tied to personalities? Back, and they used to be, like I think you mentioned one of the brands was Coke or Apple or what have you. And the brand used to just kind of more be tied to the product. And so when did it become more tied to a personality and emotional currency? Or has it always been that way?
Sure. It's funny. I think it's been around a bit longer than most of us realize. I think one of the first really kind of, if you want to go into any sort of like history of design, I think one of the first really compelling examples was, I believe it was like in 1937 or so, with the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He really kind of gets into specifically some things about like organized planning, planning of sales and services, things like that. But he kind of, in that, really breaks into this idea of getting the person to connect with more than the product, with a story.
Yeah.
A sense of kind of seeing themselves and what's happening and how it can help them, as opposed to you kind of telling that to them. And there have been some other really great examples since then too. But I also think that more so with like the boom in technology and people being able to put themselves out there more so by their own means.
The higher volume of engagement now, right? So
yeah. It's people just have instant access to everything, and they can so easily be shown something or told something is good for them and move on to the next thing so quickly. And it's like, how do you keep people engaged? How do you catch them? And just to kind of bring it back to that personal branding, I think we've seen a big boom in that, in the sense of, like trying to kind of help to bridge that gap of that personal connection to the client, to the customer, not just to make the sell, but to really actually help make a difference in their lives. Right,
exactly. And you talk about, you provide like a design challenge where you have the reader come up with his or her own kind of customer avatar, right?
Yeah.
It makes me think about all this virtual reality we have going on now, or all this talk about avatars and how, right, we want to connect with something that's not real. So it's like you're trying to build up an imaginary person from the ground up as your buyer. Like, how do you see, like almost like creating a friend in a way,
Yeah. And I think that's more so the kind of thing you want to take into your mind to kind of help humanize the experience, right? You always want to remember that whatever you're selling and whoever you're selling it to, there's always a person there, a person that has real issues, that has real hopes and dreams, that has flaws, all that woo-woo type stuff, right? But you're actually trying to connect with a human being. And so I think things like where you can kind of try to see yourself in it a bit can really help, especially on the side of the person doing the selling. You don't want to really kind of get too far into that where you're sort of trying to create this ideal person. So I definitely want to make sure that no one thinks that that's the way to go.
Right.
That's more so just to kind of help in your mind, kind of calm you down, make you feel a little less stressed perhaps. You're not going up against the world, so to speak, or this big monster, but just another human being. But I think really it's remembering that you are talking to a real person, and it's not some person you have to make up or you have to find that perfect demographic. The demographic already exists.
Yeah.
The problem is already there. It's just you're trying to really show your unique way of solving it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about emotional currency,
Mhm.
Is it better for a business to just focus on one currency? Like maybe the product you're trying to sell is trying to tap into the feeling of happiness, or you're trying to
Mhm.
tap into the feeling of relief. Is it better for a business to just stick with one of those currencies and focus on that? Or can it work if you have a service or product that can tap into multiple currencies at once?
Oh, yeah, I see. That's a great question. Because, yeah, because at any moment, someone may be feeling or going through any
Right.
multiple things all at one time, right? But but no, I do think it's helpful from a practical and sort of tactical standpoint to focus. It's always good to focus on a clear goal so that you can have clear steps to get things done and then clear parameters by which to be consistent in how you get those things done.
Mm.
And I think that helps by kind of minimizing what that focus is going to be. And so instead of sort of wondering, okay, well, we have all these things that people are feeling, of course, you can get stuck in that forever and ever. It's really trying to hone in on that overall feeling. What is the overall thing
Right.
that this really is addressing? And then kind of focus all your energy on that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you might be thinking, surely emotions are not at the center of every business transaction. And perhaps not. After all, is there really emotion involved in buying, say, a light bulb? But consider this passage in the following excerpts from Britney and Pierre's upcoming book. You may have heard the old marketing quip. You don't buy a hammer because you want to hammer. You buy a hammer because you want to drive a nail into something. But that's an incomplete idea. Why would you want to randomly drive a nail into some poor, unsuspecting wall? Sure, it's fun to hammer things, but you might risk a few banged thumbs in the process. So as a design director, you ask again, why do you want to put a nail in a wall? Oh, because you want to hang that adorable picture of your baby on the wall. And why do you want to do that? To feel joy, love, contentment. Can you see that you're not in the business of selling a product or service? You're in the business of selling emotions. And good design triggers emotions. Say, in terms of Blue Artist, right, is there a certain feeling that you want your clients to feel when they buy a product or service from you?
Oh, yeah, huh. Well, when they're, I guess it's more along the lines of what I would like them to feel while working with us.
Okay.
And it's that sense of trust.
Mm.
And I guess for themselves, maybe a sense of confidence that now they have access to and can accomplish something that was a hurdle for them before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely important. I think trust is definitely one of the most important things, especially in today's world. You know, when most of us are working online and, you know, don't have a chance to kind of almost engage before we really get involved. And so we really have to have that trust there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's just so many different ways to get access to things really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, and it's like everyone is this or that. And you just sometimes don't really know what you're setting yourself up for.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah, trust is definitely important.
Now, is there like a challenge that Blue Artists face to ensure that you're able to provide the client with that sort of feeling? And what do you do to kind of overcome that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We work with so many different people from so many walks of life. And, you know, it can at times seem like, well, how can we possibly know all the things about all these different markets? And the answer is we can't. We can't. But what we do know are the key things that help in these markets for, you know, execution, for growth across the board, no matter what market you're in. And those are the core things that we try and help people discover within themselves and express through their branding. You know, whether they're in the medical field or they're trying to sell makeup, or, you know, they're entrepreneurs that are really into motivational speaking, you know, about women's health or women's support, or, you know, mental health services. Just all those different artists, musicians. Those are lots of different fields, and we kind of have to work together. You know, when we're speaking with the client, we're very clear about, you know, hey, working with us isn't a magic bullet. You know, you're not going to suddenly be a millionaire.
Right. You're not going to hit the
overnight.
jackpot. Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully what we can do is kind of work together to refine and hone in on what your special story is and do our best to tell it in the way that's most authentic to you. And then
Right.
hopefully from there, it's a lot of hard work on their part, of course, to continue from that. But that's really the core thing we do our best to work with our clients through. And the challenge in that is just lots of things. We make mistakes as the service providers. I guess people aren't really supposed to admit that, but I think it's a very human experience.
Well,
to admit,
hey, there's honesty, which can lead to trust. So there you go.
Yeah, we're not going to always get it, or we might miss something. But, we're very open to our feedback from our clients and having those really in-depth discussions after each draft is presented to make sure that we're going in the right direction, to make sure we haven't missed anything. And sometimes, clients will question us. They'll say, well, why did you go this direction? Or, I really want to do this. And we may strongly, humbly present, well, actually, we think we should really do it this way based off of our experience. And so that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. But really, honestly, I like the vocal clients. I like when there's a bit of a challenge there, because then we have the opportunity to express, why we think this might be a good idea. And then they can see that we're not just pushing them around or just throwing things out there like we're better than them. It's no, there's a reason why we think we should go this way. Here's why we did that. And then they can go, oh, okay, well, since there was a reason, I guess it's not a personal attack or anything like that.
Right.
But we find that, in the situations where we can work through those rough spots with our clients, it does build that trust. It does help to build it, and ultimately leads to growth on both sides.
Excellent. Now, you talked about mistakes, so that kind of leads into my next question. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen, say, first-time businesses make when it comes to how they market their product or service in terms of design?
Sure. I mean, we've all held something in our hands and either been like, whoa, what is this? Or been like, oh, okay, this is intriguing. Just from a purely visual, like first 3 seconds standpoint. And honestly, I hesitate to call them mistakes per se. I think people are doing the best they can with what they have. And I applaud like the whole starting where you are situation. But I think the things that do more harm than good are just being inconsistent. And if you don't feel that you have the skills for design, or, you're not a very creative person, whatever you put together, it just needs to be consistent across all of your materials. Whatever logo you use, however you position it or place it, or whatever colors you decide to use, or whatever font you decide, you use or have access to. Sure, a more experienced design eye might be able to help you to align that a bit differently so that it's more pleasing to the eye, or you get into color theory and psychology and all of that. But before even getting into all those intimidating things, it's really just, be consistent with your visual decisions. And then some smaller things like, make sure everyone can read what's happening, and just make sure that whatever you're presenting in your messages is just clear.
Right. Well, the being consistent, that sounds simple enough. And I think even in the book you mentioned about consistency is like simplicity, if I'm remembering that correctly, right?
Oh, yeah.
And very straightforward advice there, simple enough. And yet you see so many cases where there's a lack of consistency with design in some circles. I'm not sure. Maybe that's, somebody creates their website and then they go to move to a Facebook page and they think, well, this is my Facebook page, so I've got to make it look like this. I'm like, no.
Right.
You need to make it be consistent with your website. So if your website was purple, your Facebook page should have purple, or something.
Yeah.
Right.
You got it. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the creativity in us just wants to, try everything in all the different platforms, maybe.
Oh, yeah. I think, because when you get to different platforms, it seems so deceptively different, right? Not to say that there aren't differences. There are definitely differences in how platforms draw people in, how platforms speak to people, and how they move numbers. So that's definitely a thing for sure. But it still shouldn't affect your consistent look or presentation. Sure, a whole website, you have lots of room to present different ideas or kind of try different cool little things. And how can you possibly condense that to something as simple as a Facebook cover image, right? It sounds like the biggest task in the world.
Yeah.
But I think that also comes down to really understanding your core, because if you understand the core of it, that's basically the same thing you use to even build something as big as a website. And if you can just kind of go back to those core principles, it will also translate to any other medium, even as something as simple as a square Instagram post.
Definitely. Well, one of the things I see come up all the time with design, with marketing, etc., is this whole idea of the call to action.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of questions on that. Right. The first is, do these call to actions, do they actually work? And I ask this because I get these emails from God knows what all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are very professionally designed. They got the graphics going and everything, but they'll say, hey, John, I don't know who you are. You know my name. Hey, John, 3 days before this sale's over, get it now. I don't know. Like, is it really 3 days left? Or, come on.
Yeah.
Does the call to action actually work?
I think it does. I think the call to action does work, but I think it works in a way as a suggestion.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's very important. I think it's important in your call to actions to think of it as more of a call of persuasion, if you would. And I mean that in the least sleaziest way possible.
Right. Sure.
Where it's more of this reminder, of, hey, here's this thing, we have your information because you reached out to us in some way, shape, or form, you engaged. And so now we're just trying to let you know in some way, shape, or form that we're still here for you. Our product is still here. The thing that brought you here in the first place still exists for you if you find that it has a place for you. And so it's more of a reminder. It's more of a play into the tactics of consistency than anything else. And honestly, I think any design is about communication. Any good design should prompt some kind of action.
Right.
And so what's interesting about that is that subliminally, right? You keep getting these things, and just like the example you gave where so-and-so's reaching out and they're like, hi, John, I've got this thing. It's on sale for 3 days. You better come get it.
Right.
Now, you may or may not need that thing, but now you are reminded of this person or brand that you interacted with in the past that's gotten lost in the infinite ether of your email inbox, and now they're on your mind again for just that moment, whether you need what they're offering or not, but they've taken up some of that space.
Yeah.
And if that happens consistently enough, maybe when the time comes that you do need a thing, you can go, oh, you know what? Where's that email that I saw?
Right. So it's kind of like they're playing the long game.
Playing the long game. That's right, John.
Yeah. Well, now, is it always necessary to include a call of action when you're thinking of your design, or are there times when it's not necessary, or even what's the word I'm looking for? Can do more harm than good with your design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I hear what you're saying. I think the thing I really kind of want to reframe is that good design is always a call to action, whether it's using words or because it's always trying to get you to interact. It's trying to move you to do something. And so I guess what one should really look at is how aggressive should that call to action be? How straightforward should it be? Because there's always some level of it happening. I think some of my favorite examples of really subtle call to actioning is anytime I see any sort of Apple ad.
Right.
And I'm sure that people have a lot of them in their cities. The city I most often drive through is DC, being in Maryland, very close to the DC area. And it's on the large buildings, there'll be a large picture. And it'll say something like, photo taken on iPhone.
Yeah.
Right? So nothing in there is telling me to do anything per se. But it's letting me know, hey, you see this big picture of here that looks really beautiful? And you're like, whoa, it was taken on an iPhone. So you think, oh, so what you're saying is, if I want to take a picture like that, I should get an iPhone.
Right.
Or it's, wow, that iPhone takes really great pictures. I wish my phone could take really great pictures. Maybe I need to get an iPhone. So you see, even without without being aggressive, like, hey, Do you like this photo? It was taken on an iPhone. Go get one now. They're 30% off for the next 2 days. They didn't have to get aggressive with that message.
Yeah, it's like they're showing you the world you could be a part of.
Exactly.
Without, as you say, being aggressive about it.
Oh, yeah.
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 And so there's always some subtle play going on in terms of the psychology of the call to action. But what one should kind of keep track of is just how aggressive does it need to be.
Right.
And I think that definitely has its place.
Right. Yeah, so like with the Apple example you gave, it's kind of like they're planting the seed of fascination in your mind.
Yeah.
And you bring up this idea of fascination in your book, and you had these steps about fascination, building fascination, where you're trying to bring out passion, you're trying to show a prestige. And I'm wondering, where do you think most businesses fall short with this? Are they failing to incite someone's passion in the product? Are they failing to exhibit prestige? What would you say to that?
Sure. I think the thing that will hurt you more than anything, as far as affecting your ability to be fascinating, is losing track of your own story. Now, what does that mean, right? Brittany, that's so fluffy. That's so fluffy. What does that mean? Break that down to something practical for me. I don't remember who said this quote. It's 2018, so I'm sure if someone Googles it, they can find it. But there's a really great quote that says, to copy is to die. And I think what that really breaks down to in the context of branding and design is, it's one thing to look at something and be inspired by the success that it has, but it's another entirely to try and copy it exactly and think you're going to be anything fascinating.
Yeah.
We see many copies of things all over the place. We see copies of iPhone style and design. We see copies of, how many different car companies are there. They're all still selling a car. Some of those aren't exact copies. But, look at, here's another great example too. A little more unconventional perhaps, but like there's 7-Elevens.
Right. Yep.
And then there are 612s.
Well, I'm not familiar with those.
Right. Yeah, there's only a few of them out there. But why do you think 612 maybe perhaps didn't take off as much as it could have? Because it just tried to directly copy 7-Eleven, something that already has its place in people's minds and as far as their interaction with brands. And so I think that thing that really kind of aids that fascination is, one, really honing in on what your story is, what your solution is to a problem in this world, and then really just sticking to that, really being, again, consistent with that solution and that message, and really kind of getting used to kind of making that your own. And then once you stick to that, and that's your thing, that's what you have to put out there, that's what starts to create that fascination.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say from experience, whenever I've tried to copy someone's approach or method or what have you, it has never worked in the end.
Yeah.
Never worked.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, you're not them.
Right.
You're you. Now, there are definitely things you could learn, maybe trends or things like that. But, what's funny is one of the really just stellar entrepreneurs out there, if I can name drop, his name is Gary Vaynerchuk, or otherwise known as Gary V. And he says really interesting things about the culture. He always says he hacks the culture. And I think what he's really getting at there is, you have to do your own thing. He consistently talks about this, and I think it's so true. Where you're gonna fail a lot. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes in this process of finding your true voice. But you have to go through it. You have to get through it as quickly as possible. Fail fast and hard. So you can start learning what really works and what really sticks. And once you hit that stride, that's born not out of copying, but out of experience.
Right.
Out of that intrinsic, empirical validation that, yes, this is us, or this is me, or this is our brand. that's when that fascination starts to happen.
So now this next question, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the discussion, but I'm wondering if you could say more about what, say, Blue artists, when they're working with a client to develop their design, how does that client benefit from working with Blue artists? What's the experience relationship look like that they can expect?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the top things that I'm really proud of when we're working with our clients is just we listen, you know. We really take our time and go through a couple of different consultation series where, I mean, even in just the first conversation, you know, our initial consultations are always free. And those initial consultations, we tried our best to hone them to, you know, a particular time limit, you know, like an hour or something along those lines. But really, so many great things can happen in those conversations. And people can just take that with them and keep on going if they really want to. But we find that people have such compelling conversation and reveal so much to themselves and talking with us that they do want to work with us. And it may not happen right in that moment.
Sure.
We've had people come back that we haven't heard from after an initial chat in like years, like 2 years, 3 years. We're like, you know, they make an appointment and they're on the schedule, and, you know, one of us might see a name and go, does this name sound familiar? And we're like, I'm not sure. And then we talk with them and they're like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I spoke with you guys like 3 years ago at this conference, or, you know, I had a really great chat with one of you guys' brand producers, you know, last year. And now I'm really ready to kind of pick this back up. And we're like, whoa, okay, you know, let's kind of get back into it again. And we kind of reinitiate that conversation, not just because maybe we don't quite recall them, right? But also because of what's changed since then. You know, what's different? What's new? What do we need to know that's shifted since then? What are we working with now? Because it could be completely different than it was at the time that we spoke with you. But yeah, I just think that not only are we really good listeners, but we ask these really core questions about, you know, emotional currency, about, you know, the who and the what's and the whys that get people really thinking. I think that kind of stimulation it's so effective for people trying to really build a brand that connects and that sticks with them, and they want to do business with us. And I think that's great. And I would hope that, you know, it's not any kind of secret formula. I hope more agencies do this, and we're just seeing really great brands continue to pop up all over the place. But I know that in particular is our approach. We really believe in really getting to that organic understanding of what you're doing and why and who you're doing it for, and really just sticking to that.
Yeah. Organic's a really good word to use there. Yeah, definitely.
Conversations.
I always like to end discussions like these with a kind of more of a fun question in a way.
Sure, yeah. Fun questions
and
are great.
And that is, so we're thinking about how we tend to associate personalities, traits, and what have you to brands. You know, some might see the Apple brand as this type of personality, you know, Starbucks is this type of personality, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a brand in today's market that best encapsulates you, and why or how?
Sure. Now, when you say you mean me personally, or like?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think when I look at these great brands, and like, it's really great to mention that there seems to be this association, right, of like personality to a brand. But I think what's happening more so than that, or underneath that, or that umbrellas that, however you want to put it, is we're tapping into cultures. And so what do you mean by cultures? Well, you know, things like surf culture, hip hop culture, high fashion culture, natural beauty culture, gamer culture. I think those are the things that really, you know, tribes. I think those are the sort that people are really connecting to in these brands. They're connecting with a feeling or a group or a cause that they want to be associated with. Something that maybe they feel that they already aren't, right? So they want to be there. or if they're already in it, they want to be deeper in it. And so it's always this sort of reflection of not necessarily who they already are, but who they want to be, that they see in these brands. And so I guess for me, I strongly identify with a couple of these cultures. Definitely that sort of designer, gamer situation going on. And definitely more recently, so the music culture as a musician, really getting into guitar lately. So
nice.
I would say I'll give you three things I probably look at. I mean, multiple times a day. I'm talking real productivity killers. Are the Ibanez guitar website. I mean, so great. You know what's really fascinating about Ibanez's website is they have no prices on their website, and that used to bother me. When I first went there, I was like, I can't look at any prices on here. But what I found is that I still go back to that site because the images of their products are so good. I can really see everything. They're so big and shiny, and I'm going through looking at all the different models, and the people playing them look so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be an awesome guitarist. Yeah. And I think I can do it if I have an Ibanez. And they make so many different kinds of guitars: solid body, hollow body, semi-hollow body. I won't learn out about guitars, but and I found that because there isn't really a price, I can kind of look at and fantasize playing like any guitar that's on their site.
Yeah, so it's sort of like if you were to actually see the price.
Yeah, then I'm like, oh,
the fantasy's immediately over because I can't afford that right now. So never mind, right? That makes sense. I'd say the one area where it does annoy me when there's not prices listed is when I'm looking up a restaurant's website.
Oh yeah.
Maybe where do I want to go tonight for dinner? I don't know. Let's check. Okay, it's down to these 3 places. Well, how can I know if I want to go to this one? I don't know how much the steak is going to cost me there versus this other place.
Yeah, and there's probably some really interesting psychology in that. With why it works in the case for Ibanez versus something like a restaurant. It might have something to do with that sort of gratification or the level of need. Everyone needs to eat.
Right.
Everyone doesn't need an Ibanez guitar per se. So maybe there's something in that. That's probably a whole different conversation, but yeah, you're right. There's definitely times where it's like you want to see what things cost. So
right.
You kind of feel like maybe they're hiding something from you if you can't see it. The other two, just to be brief, kind of fit in that gamer culture and I guess the world of design, and that would be the PlayStation brand. There are gamers out there. If you're a gamer yourself, John, there's so many options. There's Xbox, but I've always been on PlayStation for reasons I probably have to really sit and think about. But there's definitely an emotional connection there. Something about it. It's like, no, I'm loyal to Sony. I need to play the PlayStation. It almost feels weird to even go to my friend's house and hold an Xbox controller. There's definitely something happening there. As far as design, I think what happens with me is design doesn't really kind of promote itself as a particular brand. I guess it's more of a culture. But there are one or two, there's a handful of really great artists that really inspire me. And I guess one I'll give mention to is a very understated artist, I think. And his name is Tony Hong. Tony does very sort of surreal, expressionist type works, but his style is very distinct. It's usually ink on wood or ink on canvas. And then he kind of recently, I wouldn't say recently, but later in his career kind of branched into adding some watercolor to his works. But it's always really interesting patterned artworks in black ink against a very minimal material like metal or canvas or wood. And everything just always looks so elegant and like so, I don't know, like surreal and so clean.
Oh yeah, I definitely have to check that out.
Yeah. So I guess those are some of the 3 of the many brands, I guess, that I experience every day that really just kind of give me that inspiration to continue to grow in that field.
To learn more about how you can improve your design to increase customer engagement, be sure to get your copy of Design to Connect: How to Use Design to Better Engage Your Customers. by Pierre and Britney Walters. Available on all major book platforms by the end of September. And among the many pearls of wisdom found within this book, they write, "If there is one single takeaway from this book, it's this. You are not selling products or services. You are selling feelings." So the next time you're designing a new product or service, ask yourself, how does this product or service make my customer feel? How does the design make them feel? And see if that doesn't make a difference in your business. I'm John Marble, and this has been Build Your Difference.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Build Your Difference. If you'd like to learn more about how Blue Artists can help you develop a distinguished brand that inspires and engages a growing audience, then please visit us at www.blue-artists.com and be sure and subscribe to our monthly podcast for the latest tips and trends in brand development and marketing. And remember, you're not just making a brand, you're making a difference. Start building yours today.